2021. I'll open the meeting at 7:30. May we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And do I get roll call online, or how do we do this? Is Nick with us?
Yes, I am here this evening virtually to take the minutes.
Can you give me roll call, please?
Mr. Fitzer.
Here.
Mr. Kucera.
Here.
Mr. McHale. Mr. Newshy.
Here.
Mr. Pernick.
Here.
Ms. Redmond.
Here.
Mr. Sanaki.
Here online.
And Mr. Watson.
Here online also.
Thank you.
I hate to interrupt. This is Ed. Can somebody send me a link so that I can see the presentation?
I need the same link, please.
I will send it now.
Are you sending it to the Clausen email address?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 5 present, so that gives us a quorum. We can do what we want. The 2 other people that are online, my understanding is that they cannot vote. Am I correct?
They may discuss, but
They can opine, they can discuss anything, but they cannot vote. Okay.
We appreciate their attendance.
Okay, first thing off, agenda item number 4, I'll look for someone to make a motion that we approve the regular meeting minutes from September 14th.
I'll make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes from the September 14th, 2021 meeting of the Planning Commission.
Support.
I have a motion, I have support. Anybody have any changes, corrections? Seeing none, can I have roll call, please? Nick?
Mr. Kucera.
Yes.
Mr. Pernick.
Yes.
Ms. Redmond.
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer.
Yes.
And Mr. Newshy.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Agenda item number 5 is public discussion, items not on the agenda. Is anyone here like to say anything during public discussion, or do we have anyone online that would like to say anything?
There are no members of the public online at this time.
Nothing online, no one here wants to make a comment? Okay, seeing none, I will then close public discussion. And we will move along, we're going right good here. Agenda item number 6, consideration of the site plan use approval for 1100 North Crooks.
okay. So, property is 1100 North Crooks. I'm going to throw up a screenshot of an aerial here just so that we have the site to look at. There it is. So what you have in front of you here for 1100 North Crooks is not really a site plan, because they're not actually making any physical modifications to the site. There's nothing proposed there. And in fact, the site is compliant with your ordinances because it was updated not that long ago. It's got many things that sites on that stretch of Crooks often don't have because they were developed prior to your ordinances changing. It has a green belt along the eastern property line, for instance. A lot of the properties don't have that. The paving goes right up to the fence. It has islands in its parking lot. A lot of the other parking lots there, the larger ones, don't have those. So it's as sites over there go, it's actually much more compliant than most are with the current ordinance. So it's 7 acres, and it is in the BRD2 Business Renewal District. The building on the site is 56,000 square feet, or a little more, and it is an industrial building. It's got a very large parking lot in the back that kind of hooks around the building to the south and goes behind it. And there are a couple of driveways from Crooks Road that this site is accessed from. When we look around, we have more BRD2 zoning to the north and south, and we have industrial uses on those sites. To the east is R2, and there's just single-family homes. You can see them on the aerial up there. And then to the west, across Crooks and Troy, that's IB Industrial Business, which has some office and industrial uses in it. So, as I said, they're proposing no physical changes to this site. So what they're proposing to do is reoccupy the building to use it as a vehicle research and exchange center. And I'll let them, they have a representative here, I'll let them go into some detail on what that entails. They've described it in a letter that was included in your packet. So they're before the Planning Commission requesting a determination that the use is permitted in the location. And I'll get into that in a little bit. I've included your dimensional standards for the district. They're all met for this building. Again, they're not proposing any changes, but I just wanted to kind of run through all those standards and make sure that we touched on all of them. They have a concrete loading area in the rear yard. They have compliant trash enclosures. Clearly, they meet the parking requirement. They've got 429 spaces here. A lot of those are going to be used to temporarily house vehicles. For the actual building itself, given the use, about 38 spaces would be required. So they've got well more than what they need. They're going to be using most of it for the actual course of conducting the use of the site. They've got the existing screen walls and fences. They have, the required landscaping. They've got their they actually have a 25-foot green belt, not a 20-foot green belt. They do have the front yard landscaping as well. Signage will be under a separate application. Lighting, they do have some wall pack lighting and some pole-mounted fixtures in the back parking area. They're not proposing new lighting. I would like to just get some verification that that's in compliance with current lighting regulations. It looks from a visit to the site like they do have cutoff fixtures on those poles toward the back of the site. So that would be compliant. And then... let's see. So we've got the sidewalk, and that's already there. And then, again, they're not changing the building, but it actually does meet the design specifications of the BRD2 district. And we don't have any problems from other agencies as far as the proposal is concerned. And then when we get to the question that's really at hand here, the use. So they're describing a use that's substantially similar to the previous use by a car dealership, and that was in operation until quite recently, just the last month or so. It has operational characteristics that suggest a low impact on surrounding properties outside of business hours. The BRD2 district permits any use in which the principal function of conducting research, design, testing, and pilot or experimental product development. So the previous use was approved under that item when we look at our records. And the proposed use is similar in character and impact. So the short-term storage of personal protective equipment that's mentioned in the applicant's narrative isn't really a permitted use in the district. It's subordinate to the proposed principal use of the property, though, and it is proposed to be temporary. So the planning commission should really discuss the expected time frame of that with the applicant. And, that's really the question that's before you, is I accidentally left a little thing about a variance under the recommendation. That's from a previous review, and I meant to delete it, and for some reason it didn't get deleted. So ignore that, please. The question really before you is this use similar enough to that use that's permitted in the district that we've called out under item 14 there, that you're comfortable with it moving forward in this district? And again, we'll let them speak to the details of their use as they've outlined in their letter. But that's really the question you're answering. There's nothing about the site itself that really needs to be discussed because it's just staying like it is. So do you have any questions for me before we turn it over to them?
The only question I got is, like you said, in number 14, the short-term storage of PPE mentioned is not permitted in use in this district. Why is that? Why can you not store things like that?
That's a good question, actually. Having not been here for the development of the BRD2 district, I don't really know necessarily. Clearly, there are a lot of industrial uses. There's a whole, that's basically what the whole south part of the district is. It's all industrial uses at the moment. So warehousing is sort of a natural adjunct to industrial uses, generally speaking. And again, in this case, their short-term storage use is subordinate to the principal use that they're proposing. So I think it could be potentially considered to be accessory to the principal use.
Okay.
It's not directly related, but
Do
given
we
it's...
specifically call out PPE things? I mean,
No. It's more the warehousing aspect of it. It's being used for storage, so that's
Okay.
not a listed use in the district.
okay. Anyone else have any questions?
I have a question. What languages is used to, and I guess where PPE is not permitted in this district?
Well, it's more the general storage use than the storage of PPE specifically. So if you were to propose a warehouse in this district, that wouldn't be a permitted use. So that's really the only thing we have to work with that's listed as a use in our ordinance that deals with storage on a site. So the other industrial uses on this district, they all have some warehousing in them because they're making something and they got to keep it somewhere. It's always an adjunct to the main use, though, which is the manufacturing or the assembly or whatever else they're doing on the site. So really, it's a matter of is it subordinate nature here and its temporary nature okay with you? Are you okay allowing that as an adjunct to the principal use of the site, which is more research oriented?
Anything else for Joe?
Do you know when the BRD2 district was defined, about the year? I'm just curious.
I want to say it was about 10 years ago, something like
10
that.
years? Okay.
Yeah.
'Cause, I mean, it would seem, when I think storage, you think of the self-storage, and is that maybe why it was omitted? Is
Well-
like looking to discourage a self-storage type facility? Is that?
Yeah. It's possible that's what that's one of the reasons that they didn't put warehousing and storage in as a permitted use. They might have been trying to avoid that. Yeah. I'm not real sure.
But we have other adjunct uses, you said, and this
Yeah.
is falling in line with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of accessory warehousing going on in the district.
But it's not directly correlated with the testing that's going on there, right?
In this case, it's not directly related to the testing that's going on the site. Yeah,
Okay.
that's the kind of the one caveat. Yeah.
Joe, you said this site was improved not that long ago.
Yes, I don't recall the exact date, but it was improved
Within the last year or two, we went to
fairly
the whole-
recently. It was, well, it was a little longer ago than that, but it was, I think sometime in the last, they might actually know, but it was sometime in the last decade anyway. It was definitely done recently.
So was testing done the last time it was approved as well, or is it testing and the warehouse storage?
The previous user was removing parts from cars and refurbishing them and doing some other activities like that. And that at the time was found to fall under the research and design function. I don't know exactly what they were doing, but they were doing something pretty similar to what they're proposing to do, where they are removing some parts and they are testing them. And
So the only question I have, and maybe this is more for whoever's speaking on their behalf, is the testing and in terms of noise and omissions and how that might affect the surrounding community.
Right.
That would be something I'd want to know more about.
That's correct, yeah. And they've provided some information on what they expect in terms of truck traffic and deliveries and things in their letter that they provided. But yeah, the noise question, noise and vibration, I guess, would really be
Well, and
the
even the
question you
testing
have.
omissions of constant running vehicles maybe and
Sure.
the neighboring,
Yep.
if that's not something that was previously happening there on a regular basis, just knowing how much that might affect the surrounding community and the homes.
Yep, that would all be appropriate to discuss with them, yes.
Okay.
Is the applicant here tonight? Would they like to speak to this?
Approach the microphone.
Can you please introduce yourself and tell us where you fit into this whole thing?
Yeah. Good evening, Attorney Sam Kilberg on behalf of General Motors. I'm here with.
My name is Randy Schatz, and I'm the General Motors Real Estate Project Manager.
So as it was described to you, the use that General Motors is proposing is substantially similar to the current use, which is actually was used by a Suburban dealership. They were kind of reclaiming parts and doing some testing, and we're proposing a similar use. I'll let Randy speak to the specifics of the operations of it all. But getting to something that was talked about, the temporary storage of the PPE, I think it's something that really, municipalities didn't consider short-term PPE storage during a global pandemic at that time. So it's not that it's not permitted in this district. The ordinance is just silent. And I believe under the ordinance, you do have the authority to allow it as a permitted use under section 1200-21C, and that if the planning commission finds that it's not consistent with the purpose of the article, which is not, and it does not significantly impair the present or potential use of adjacent properties, therefore you can find that short-term PPE storage. And I don't anticipate that they'll be storing PPE long-term for forever, but during the global pandemic, it's going to be used. So.
Can you
ahead.
speak to like what percentage of that facility you're going to use to store that?
Yeah, let me probably help solve some of this. We're actively looking for a warehouse that can house the PPE equipment. Our goal was not to use this warehouse to store PPE equipment, but we are trying to move it out of a current location that's under contract for sale. So if it has to come here, we're hoping we can move it on November 1st directly from where it's at to a new location in Flint. If that can't occur, this would be a short-term 6-month stay. That would probably in the beginning take the full warehouse, and it's more of a distribution where the PPE equipment comes in, and then we distribute it back out, representing General Motors, to the other plants that have to have the masks, the face shields, the gloves, the equipment that goes with the PPE. So this is very short term. We recognize this was not the intended use. GLS is a subsidiary of Suburban Automotive. GLS was actually doing the work in this warehouse on behalf of General Motors. This was more of an operation of what we call captured fleet, where they would take these vehicles that come in and out of service, and they would, an instrument panel, after 3 months of testing, we would find we need to upgrade them, so we would change those instrument panels before they would go to market, or we'd find out a part is not working and we want to get it corrected before we go to commercial production. So GLS was working on behalf of General Motors under a contract in this building to do that type of what we call retrofit of the parts of the cars and make sure they're correct before we take and move them on to commercial production or even reselling them to the commercial market. So the PPE equipment is really a very, very short term, and I even hope not to bring it here and have to move it twice. And gosh, I hope we don't even have to talk about it a year from now.
Are you then buying them out, or are they going to still remain there
No, what
working for
happened
you?
is GLS has multiple locations around Metro Detroit, and what we asked them to do was to consolidate. Obviously, we're not moving as many vehicles right now with the chip shortage.
Right.
And so we've asked them to consolidate, so that's when this facility became empty, or we knew it was becoming empty, and we've been working with Suburban on backfilling that with other operations that we have that we need to find a home for.
Okay.
So as a distribution center, that's what you're going to be temporarily? Is it
Yeah, I mean, we're talking, this lease in Flint should be signed in November. And so if it has to come here, it'd be very short-term, 6 months, where we would bring the PPE equipment where it's currently being stored today, put it here, and then hopefully move it to Flint in the new warehouse. But it would go out what we call mail truck run, which would go to the tech center, it would go to Flint, Lansing, and some other production facilities.
And what would take the place in the warehouse then?
In the warehouse, our original intent, as described in the letter, is we are actively looking, and before I can make any comment, we have another what we call time management group in another close city to this that is needing to grow. And that time management is where you basically take a car, whenever you take it into service and you need an oil change. We do time studies on how long it should take to do an oil change, or how long it should take to rotate your tires, or how long to change your rotor on a front wheel. And so we take these vehicles and we do time studies to see, so that when someone charges you 4 hours to do a grease job and oil change, we know that's not right, right? Because we've done these time studies. Not that you might have been, but. So that's part of what we want to move here, is this other operations in a neighboring city that's outgrown its size, that needs a new home, where they'll do these time study of vehicles. And as we are moving into new technology, we need to know more about how long it takes to fix and change things out and that type. And that's what the building purpose would be used for, is a time management study group and research.
So would there be conversion needed then in terms of storage to vehicle study? There's no conversion?
What do you mean by conversion?
Well, you're storing PPE, you need lots of shelves, and then you're doing lots of studies.
No, the PPE would be on pallets.
Okay,
So it's already today on pallets. We have to wrap it 3 or 4 times in plastic wrap to keep it clean. So it would come over in pallets and then just be moved in and out Viva high-lows on those same pallets. If it came, it would just move back out on pallets into semis, and then this group neighboring would move in and turn it into more of I don't want to say a garage, but it would be a technical garage to do this research and study of time management.
okay. And in terms of your testing aspect,
No emissions. Well, I shouldn't say no emissions. It's not set up for high volume. GLS did have 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 bays where they did have cars that they hook up to vents that is goes through a filter, but the primary use is not for running it. It's not set up to have vehicles run inside. I can't do it from a safety standpoint unless it has that hookup. But
so you're not going to be testing in
It's
parking
not-
lots or noise?
No, it
things are
really
gonna
shouldn't. It's
increase?
more of a parts activity. It's not, I know what you're thinking, but it's not that type of high-intensity testing and research. This is more of bringing in a vehicle, got a problem with the seat, how long does it take the seat to come out? How do you fix it? A lot of recall. Let's say you get a notice on a seat, you need to take it in, and have it flipped out. How long does it take to take that seat out, fix the cable, put the seat back in? They do that multiple times to get an idea of how to do it. They bring in different techs. We'll bring in technicians from surrounding dealerships and states to come in and learn how to do that same work.
Okay.
And then, Mr. Schatz, part of this was a dealership, right? This is an auto dealership. It's configured, or it was?
It actually, I think, was a FedEx warehouse,
Oh, okay.
matter of fact,
Okay.
at one point before Suburban bought it and converted it into this garage-like activity.
Okay, and that's what I wondered. So at least some part of it, I haven't been inside, and at least some part of it is configured for repair bays or floor drains and.
It has floor
hoists and
drains,
things
which
like
were
that
just
would-
cleaned out as
Okay.
part of our due diligence. We asked Suburban to undertake a number of environmental activities. So yes.
Okay,
But it's really, I kind of picture this room, but real long.
yeah.
And then there's a little knee wall down the middle that they put lifts to use.
Okay.
To put the cars up. But you can't run cars in there
Understood.
without having this special exhaust system, which is two, I think.
I would assume you'd have no problem with the lighting, that you have to show us that the site is in compliance.
I'm assuming we're not making any changes to the lighting, so I'm assuming that it was in compliance before.
That should
It
have been taken
appears
care
to
of.
be from a glance, but yeah, if you could just provide some photos or something, that would be,
Yeah, I would have thought that
Okay.
that would have been taken care of when we did the site plan the last time.
yeah.
but-
So-
It looks like it was.
Okay, so what do you, I guess we can ask you afterwards what you need
Yeah.
to support
Okay.
that.
Like I said, photos should be
Okay.
sufficient.
Any other questions?
I have a question. So, in your letter, it describes that GLS had a maximum of 4 trips per day. So I guess what does the trip count look like in the future use, proposed use?
And I'm trying to remember the letter there, but as you can see, it was a large parking lot, which GLS stored marketing vehicles. Those vehicles were converted or fixed or retrofit. What we would be looking to do is, as our company vehicles come out of service, which right now we don't have a lot of because of the shortage, these vehicles would be taken from our Warren Vehicle Exchange and brought over here. Typically, that's done in small batch numbers. Like each day, you might have 8 come over, 8 go back, vice versa. That's the use of the parking lot as an, I'll call it, online auction. There'll be no actual physical auction on site. These cars will have their picture taken, they'll be put up online on a web, and dealers, retailers will come and purchase them. They'll bring small wedge trucks, but there is no high volume. We don't work, that site is not today where we are. It's not a 24/7 operation. It's basically business hours for dealers to come pick up these vehicles.
And forgive me if it was and I'm forgetting, but how long are you looking for this term to last?
5 years.
5 years? Okay.
Suburban Automotive is a very good group, takes good care of their property, so.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. I will entertain a motion at this point in time.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the site plan use for 1100 North Crooks as presented.
Support.
I have a motion, I have support. Anybody want to add anything to that, or we're all happy with it?
I'd like to add that the applicant also provide verification for that the lighting meets the regulations and ordinances.
Right, I think that's pretty minimal. Would you add that to your?
Sure. I'll amend my motion.
And you will support that with
I
the
will.
addition?
I will.
Okay, very good. Nick, can I have roll call, please?
Mr. Shy,
Yes.
Mr. Pernick,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
and Mr. Kucera.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Welcome to Clausen.
Thank you.
Brings us to agenda item number 7, other business, the master plan update.
I'll put it up on my.
Good evening. So at our last conversation that we had about the master plan, and I can't remember if it was 2 weeks ago now or if it was a month ago. Time is flying, as you were chatting about earlier. And we had presented some of the redevelopment concepts, and we had some conversation about what redevelopment might look like. And what that meant for the master plan, and then eventually what that would mean for future implementation items. So in terms of any zoning changes that might need to take place. So with the input that we got, we fleshed out the rest of the master plan document. So you'll see in that document that it had the updated land use descriptions. It included 3 of those redevelopment concepts. So we weren't assuming that we would say, we pick one, but rather that we offer these as examples for consideration by the development community at that time when these properties are available. In doing that, we've presented some different kinds of concepts. We talked a little bit about the single family, but we also, and that's the primary housing type that's appropriate in both of those locations. But we talked about some of the additional housing types that we may wish to include as well, like the townhomes or like the accessory dwellings, or the duplex or the quadplex units. So that from those examples, one would take that the primary appearance is to be single-family residential, but that there may be opportunities to tuck in some different housing types in the ways that we had suggested. Also from that, we've outlined some of the possible zoning standards. Is that what you put up there?
This is the goals and objectives.
Oh, okay, I should put my glasses on if I'm going to try and read those screens. Those were the goals and objectives from the last master plan that we just copied over, the ones that were relevant. We included all those. We have the section on housing. I noticed that we needed a couple extra images that we had intended to get. I don't know that there's more than just a couple of duplex units in the city, but we thought we would have one in there to show as an example. I think on the next couple of pages is the discussion about the future land use. Or did I? Yeah. And you can see the blue text is the updated language from the previous plan. And then following that are those redevelopment concepts, and there's no change to the future land use map.
Right, yeah.
And then following the discussion of those redevelopment concepts, we get to the implementation chapter. And that would include some of the zoning changes right there as the zoning plan. The zoning plan is something that we are required to put into a master plan document. And it's helpful because it helps us understand the relationship between the future land use map, so the vision about what we want to see, and the zoning ordinance, which are the standards by which we allow development to occur. So the chart is lining everything up, and it's showing some of the things from the previous master plan where there were some zoning districts that needed to maybe be created. We just updated it now to reflect the rezoning that we did with the downtown rezonings that we did earlier this year, to make note of that. And then talking about some of the zoning changes that we might envision going forward. And so we've included those in the implementation. We really only use the one goal, the housing and neighborhoods. Oh, I think the other one too, the sustainability one, yeah. And so we break those down into a couple different categories. So you'll see the zoning action items. Those are the ones that are primarily with the responsibility of the Planning Commission. And then we have some of the other items, the advocacy items or capital improvement items. Those are things that we want to make sure we're flagging. As we had our conversation last night about capital improvement planning, making sure that we're taking those items from the master plan and highlighting those so they can be included in our capital improvement plan. And the metrics. The metrics are a way in which we are trying to gauge our progress at the implementation items and towards the goals that we had set forth in the master plan. It's something that the last master plan doesn't have, so this will be something that's kind of new just for this particular area. But when we go to update the master plan again in, I think, 2023, that'll be something that we'll want to, I think, be adding to that as well. So just something to keep in mind. So that's the overall description of what we have in front of you tonight. Next steps in the process would be when you're ready to have this go out as part of our requirement of state law. We have to send this out to the other neighboring communities as well as the other reviewing agencies, which include Oakland County Planning and Economic Development Services. After there's a 42-day review period, we're not changing the future land use map. We consider this an amendment to the last master plan. After that 42-day review period, then we'll set a public hearing, the planning commission will hold a public hearing, and then take action to adopt the master plan. So those are the rough steps. Administratively, what that means is, once the planning commission is comfortable, you will send a recommendation with the document to council and request that council direct staff to release the plan to the reviewing agencies and the neighboring communities as required. So that's just sort of a little administrative thing that we have to keep in mind before we set our 42-day review period and our public hearing. If you were ready to do that today, we think this would probably go to council next week, as early as next week potentially. If they said it's fine to send it out, the 42 days would have it be on probably our November 23rd public hearing, which is 2 days before Thanksgiving, which maybe not a great date for a public hearing. So the next one after that would be December 14th. So that's just kind of a rough guesstimate of the timeline based on all those parameters. And so I'm happy to answer any questions that you have or listen to comments that you have about the document that's in front of you.
What would it take to, I mean, it doesn't seem like, at least the formatting of it, it looks like acknowledgements, table of contents to be
Yes.
added. And then is it essentially ready to go? I mean, subject to whatever our additional comments or questions.
It is. There's a couple little images that we want to put in, and I noticed on the third Baker site, we wanted to fill in a little bit more of the examples on that one too. So we had a couple little things but those are fairly minor.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're not substantive changes.
No,
Okay, so.
I noticed a typo too on one of the pages that I put in there.
What we're looking at is updating the master plan.
Correct.
And the copy I have now is the 2021 master plan amendment. And I have a zoning map in here that shows me zoning areas. And I dug at home, I found this one from January 20th, 2009, the City of Clawson Master Plan. And in here is the map of the future land use. And there seems to be a difference, and I can't explain to myself why. The upper left-hand corner of the City of Clawson is now red, which is the BRD2 area. And when we were planning it out before, that was all laid out as industrial area.
You've had another master plan since then, since 2009. I believe it was 2017 or
I
16.
must be missing the 17, I've got 09.
Yeah, it was 17, 18.
Yeah, I might be able to pull it up because I'm connected. Hold on one
I
second.
got it.
You got it? All right. All right, I'll have Joe look that one up.
So somewhere along the line, we've changed the zoning in these areas.
Right.
Okay, and can you explain to me why we have what is called I-1 limited industrial area, and there's references made to industrial 2 area? Is there an industrial 2
There is
area?
not an industrial 2 area mapped.
There isn't.
No, you have a district, but it's not mapped. So it's a paper district, as we
It was
say.
called out in the Rye Oak Review here last couple of weeks ago. That's why people are questioning it.
We discussed that at one of our meetings too, recently with Joe. What was that, about the smoke shops or the hookah bar things?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it was that it's a district that you have in the zoning ordinance, but it's not mapped to a actual location. So
So does it
there is,
exist?
there's
Does it exist or
no,
no?
there's no property that is zoned I-2.
Okay.
But if you wanted to, you have the district available. So if you had some property that you felt like those standards and those uses that are listed in that I-2 district would be appropriate, you could create that because you've got the words that go with it.
Okay, so,
So this is the future land use from the 2017
Oh, you got it up there.
plan. Yeah.
what year is that?
It was adopted 27. It's 2017, but I think it was adopted in 2018.
Okay.
I think
And what is that purple or that bluish
That's
color?
mixed use 2, so
Okay.
that's BRD2.
That's the mixed use 2 area. So you did that a few years ago.
Okay, so it's changed from industrial to mixed use to BRD2?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Joe had mentioned as well at a recent meeting as far as I-2 is concerned.
Mm-hmm.
It would need, first of all, a huge, the type of industry I think that's contemplated for that district would require a huge amount of space and a pretty sizable change to what our thoughts are, or what the citizens' thoughts are for with the components of the city. Is that right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
it'd be a very large area,
Mm-hmm.
and within a 2-by-2 city.
Right.
Yeah, but we have the space for it conceptually
Right.
if we wanted to.
Right, and we can go back if you are interested in, how was there an I-2 district at some point and then it was removed from the map, but we kept the text? Or was the text created in the thought that someday there might be a space? Do we need it anymore? Is it causing confusion? That's
Right.
another topic for another meeting,
Yeah,
I
I think
think.
it causes more confusion than it's
It
worth.
may.
It's not like we're gonna tear these school buildings down and make it an industrial.
No, and those are certainly not called out for anything other
Right.
than what they are. So they are, one of the things that we talk about in the zoning section for implementation is, do we want to create another district that goes over these properties? Do we want to create an overlay over these properties? Or do we want to consider allowing some of those different housing types by right in those single-family districts? That's something that we don't have to decide right now, but that's food for thought based on some of the information that's in the future land use descriptions and in the redevelopment concepts.
So how would we formulate, so you're looking for us to put forth a motion then to put this in front of council, but this is not essentially rezoning those, right?
We're not rezoning anything
No.
with this, no.
This is just a
And we're not-
concept that we're putting in front so that they can, because you haven't talked to council yet about the outcome of the town hall meetings that you've had or
Well,
open house, sorry,
yeah.
not town hall, open house meetings and stuff. So this is just to present those concepts?
Well, it's a little bit more than that. So we've got the summaries of those meetings that we've had, that's included in the document right now. And the recommendation is in the future land use descriptions, that modified description of the future land use that envisions some of the different housing types. And then we have the redevelopment images themselves, which are two of the three that are presented for each site are slightly different than what we would be able to permit by right currently under the current zoning. And we say in there that we may be open to these other kinds of concepts, keeping in mind that the visibility and the main appearance of these homes in this district as they're redeveloped would be primarily single-family in appearance, that would be the predominant housing type, but yet we would recognize that there may be a need or a desire in having a different housing type, and that in the redevelopment concepts, based on those other things, including the scale, the size, the articulation of the facades, the garages, the orientation of garages, street trees, all of those other factors that would go into that, that's our boundaries, if you will, on how far we're willing to go with those other housing types other than traditional single-family that we're already permitting. And so that's how we establish really the framework for moving forward with that. But it doesn't mean that any of those are going to be built.
Right, but if we change and amend our master plan to open up to those concepts, and we decide against rezoning for those concepts, then do we unamend our master? Like, where do we go from there? Like, let's say we move forward here, and then we get a lot of, hopefully a lot more public input on things, and that say that they don't love that idea. And we come back and say, all right, we're gonna, based on public input, we want single-family homes here, but we've already changed and amended our master plan. Is that something that kind of pigeonholes us in a way to developers or things like that? I'm just wondering.
I don't think any of those three options are significantly dramatic enough in terms of their density or their scale or their mass that would trigger something that's completely unlike what you've seen in those images, right? So we even the pages that we showed for Shalom, where we suggest that there could be a spot in that development that's townhouses, it's a few it's not all of it. So I think we're being pretty clear that while we'll allow some of that, it's interior to the site. It's not the predominant style of the housing in that area. So I don't think so.
Are we saying a percentage of that lot?
No, we haven't set a percentage of that lot. It keeps it, I mean, we didn't say, we could be more explicit and say we don't expect it to be all of this. But I think it's reasonable to keep that exact percentage off the discussion because we don't know what that would look like. But what we are saying is that the predominant housing type should be still single family. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just to directly address the question, if we amend our master plan to permit something or with a particular concept in mind, and then we don't implement that concept, what then? Essentially, the next time you get to your master plan, you just omit that.
Okay.
You don't have to go back and unamend it or anything. Master plan ideas go unimplemented all the time. So, and sometimes it's for good reason. Yeah, and sometimes it's just because the community doesn't get to it. But yeah, you're not under, by putting it in a master plan, you're not under any obligation to ultimately implement it. The idea is that it's giving you the opportunity to implement it.
Okay.
That was good. Thank you, Joe. And I think the other thing, too, is even at the beginning of the document, we talk about it being a guide, and that this is not binding anybody to anything, and that it should be considered with respect to the community's feedback and the ability of the zoning ordinance to address those types of developments.
It's the beginning of the conversation.
Exactly.
Okay. So next question, and I know it said on here it was more of a staff thing than planning commission, but what are we going to do? I feel like there needs to be something that is ongoing with community in order to get input and in order to make it known that these discussions are happening so that we can have dialogue between community and so is there a plan kind of put in place on how we might go about that? And I know you said beginning December it would potentially go to community
public hearing.
What are we going to do between now and then to make sure that the public is involved as much as possible?
We will have, it's been on the website. We don't have this current version on the website yet, but with Nick's help, we'll get that uploaded, in the next couple of days, just to make sure that the community has the same information. It's part of, actually, it, I think, was part of the link to the meeting agenda as well. So they've always been available to the community on the links through Planning Commission agendas if people have been interested. But we also have had it up on its own webpage on the city's website. So that'll continue, and that'll be up there until we have our public hearing.
Yeah, but I mean, in order, I know it's available, but in terms of spreading word that it exists in these conversations, because so many people right now might be thinking of different elections and we just passed the millage and there's other things they might not know this is even existing right now. So I just mean in terms of spreading the word about this throughout the community. I know you said you were going to mail how many within the parameters of Shalom and Baker, right?
We did that for the open house.
Okay.
And we had about 25 or 30 folks that came to the open house. So I think through, and I think Joan, if Joan's on still, using the social media to be able to share that availability of the draft that's online, so that people have heard about it and they have the opportunity to look at it as well.
Okay.
Jill, is this document and just an amendment, or is it the amended master plan?
It's an amendment to the 2016 17 or 18 master plan. So it's
Got
like
it.
a supplement
Got it.
to that plan.
So if somebody wanted to understand what the city's master plan, when this
Whole
passes and is approved, if somebody wanted to understand the whole master plan, they have to have both documents, the
Yes.
amendment and the master
Right.
plan.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Ed, I see you up there. Can we unmute Ed, please?
Thanks, this is Ed Sinaki. I have not been on the planning commission long enough, I believe, can someone tell me what meeting minutes I can read that would give the direction to Giffords and Webster to come up with these amendment areas? Yeah, I don't think I've missed many meetings since I was appointed, but I don't recall ever going on a line by line or a paragraph by paragraph assessment of what this amendment contains and is and how it executes. I'm a little confused here.
And I'm sorry, Ed, I'm really not clear by your question either. Which part? Because we've been talking about the master plan now since the beginning of the year? February, maybe, March? March. With respect to the school properties and trying to get ahead of their, assuming we were trying to just plan ahead so that if those properties did become available, that we would understand what the vision was for redevelopment, so that when we do get a development proposal, that we at least have some tools at our disposal to begin to regulate that development and shape it in the way that the city is interested in seeing it happen. So, and we've had those conversations at least since March, if I'm not mistaken. So is there something else that you're asking that I'm not understanding?
No, I do understand that. I'm guessing I didn't get to the part, I don't recall, where we said all of those possibilities were important to include in this as potential concepts.
I think
I know that there was a lot of things that were worked out.
Right, so we had, at a couple months ago, we had, and in fact, before the open house, we had the discussion about the different housing types. We had a presentation that we did that showed different examples of different housing types. We used those then with the open house, the same images, to get some feedback from the community. And the feedback was fairly mixed in terms of what people wanted to see. And so when we did those redevelopment concepts, which some of those we had at the open house as well, so we've had those back then, we tweaked them a little bit. You saw them a month ago. And we keep, I guess I haven't heard that there's opposition to those. But if there is, then we need to know that before we send this out. So we can't, in other words, those redevelopment concepts are trying to reflect the variety of input that we've gotten from both the community at the open house and the planning commissioners here at these meetings over the last 6 months, which has been kind of mixed, to be honest. So if we're off base, then please let us know so that we can make these adjustments, because we don't want to put forth a document that's not within the support of the planning commission, certainly. Does that answer your question, Ed?
It does say, but I don't recall where we went through and decided that we were on track or were not on track. I don't recall any motions or proposals that said, yeah, we're on track, let's go to the actual publication.
Right, and that's exactly what I'm asking you tonight. So I'm not asking you to, I said at the very beginning, and maybe I didn't say it clearly enough, when you're ready, when you're comfortable with this document, we will ask to have it made available. if you were ready today, that's the process and those are the dates. If you're not ready today, then we push everything off. So I guess we would like some more direct feedback if what we've shown in the document is not consistent with what the Planning Commission wishes to see. This is not our document, it's your document.
Last tag.
It seems to me over the last 6 months, and maybe even a little longer, that we've had multiple meetings with components or with parts of this discussion. Parts of discussion about future land use, parts of discussion about amending the master plan. All of the discussions about the new adaptive use or reuse of the school properties. And so while it has been, Mr. Snaki, this is just, I guess, my perception of it. I think there's been a portion of this in many meetings over the last 6 months. So maybe among the consideration of other city business or other commission business, it wasn't as readily apparent that we were piecing together bit by bit this proposed amendment to the master plan. But I think that's where we've been headed bit by bit.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.
I think it's occurred, Mr. Snaki. I don't, so.
Well, can I just say that when I read the document, I thought it might be helpful maybe to get more input from zoning in particular, or different departments to maybe come together and discuss these items as well.
So who would that be?
Well, I don't know, just like, it would be helpful to know zoning's perspective of what we're putting forth.
But that's you.
That's us.
That's us.
Well,
Zoning Board of Appeals doesn't make that call.
No, they wouldn't. It would be the
I
Planning
know they
Commission.
don't make the call, but they can see different aspects of things that, and different impacts of things that maybe go past what we're seeing, and just input from different sources, I guess, in order to see this in different ways.
Okay, and we can do that, but it would help if you were a little bit more specific about what information you're looking for and whose perspectives you're looking for.
Well, I guess zoning in particular.
Okay, let me go back just for that for a second. All right, so the Planning Commission's responsibility is to create the master plan. And again, the master plan, and this is for the general public, is the master plan is our blueprint for the future. It's our long-range vision of what we think we would like to see. The land used in the city of Clawson and how everything is related to each other. From that master plan, the Planning Commission helps create the zoning ordinances that reflect that master plan and shape and legally provide the framework by which development occurs. Planning Commission does all that work. It's up to council ultimately to make take the action to adopt those zoning changes, but those are part and parcel Planning Commission's responsibility. The Zoning Board of Appeals is there to provide relief from zoning standards when there are specific properties that just don't quite fit the traditional framework that we have. In Clawson, you've got a lot of your parcels are pretty much the same size, and there's not a lot of variety, topography, things that make differences in that way, but still that's the Zoning Board of Appeals' responsibility. I would never stop anybody from looking at it, any resident, from looking at the document and providing us input. But I don't know that the Zoning Board of Appeals, based on their role, would have much more input or perspective than the Planning Commission
Well,
would.
but zoning, you just said by nature, and thanks for the breakdown. But I don't think we come up with the master plan on our own as Planning Commission. And, I wasn't here when we formulated the last, but without a collaborative effort, including zoning, since they're the ones granting a variance, and that's essentially what we're doing, in their opinion, would be highly credible, since that's what they do. and council as well, almost, I don't know if it's a workshop type thing or something where we're just able to collaborate. Like, they'll see things when they're granting variances and when they're seeing it every day, the impact, and they're considering those type of variances and what type of impact it might have on the community.
And that's true. And maybe when we get to, once you're comfortable with all of this and we move on to the next part, which is if we are making any zoning changes, and that's if. If we're not, then we just go on about our business. But if there are zoning changes that we want to make in terms of creating a special district, creating an overlay, allowing any different kind of housing type, changing heights or setbacks, that's maybe more of an appropriate place to put that workshop idea into place, because then we're talking about specifics. Right now, we're talking big picture and concepts. We're not talking about, well, what is the front setback going to be? We don't know. We're saying it's probably similar.
But if you're changing a residential to allow for a quad or a duplex, then you are changing a lot of those aspects. And I do think that you're the expert in terms of seeing how this all plays out. But I do think it's important to get input from as many different sources in their expertise as possible, especially when we're making such an impact on the community that you don't go back from. It's a permanent thing.
It's not a permanent thing, because this is not changing the zoning of any property. It's not creating any new district, and it's not creating any different kinds of standards than what you already have in place right now. It's not doing that at this point. It's still just saying there's a couple of different options that we envision that we could see being realistically presented to the city of Clawson. And when you look at those three, they don't vary tremendously. The first one of each one of those two sites is just exactly what you would be able to permit today. It's a single-family home on the regular lot within the existing platted parcel lines. The other two do it in a slightly different way by allowing for some of those units to be slightly different. It's not a wholesale change of every unit in there, but it's a partial. So that's, I think, pretty clear in there that this document isn't saying we're going to let it all be townhomes and quads. It's saying it's primarily still a single family where we may allow a few of these other types. Now, to your point about the additional input, we did invite all those folks to the open house. And I know that some of those people did attend, and that was good, and we got their feedback. And we can do that, but I'd like us to be very explicit about what we're asking people to do and what exactly we want their input on. And I also would like you to all think about, when we get that input, what are we going to do with it? I think it would be helpful if the Planning Commission has some loose form of consensus before we send it out, because to me right now it almost feels like we're not really sure at all what we think, and we've been talking about this for 6 months. So is there a loose sense of consensus on some of this? Is this are these three concepts really off base in a way that we should really just stick with the input that we've gotten so far that says single-family residential is really all we want to consider here?
Well, we're considering a lot of different things, so that's, I know you said this isn't permanent, but this is one step toward permanent, so it's something I myself take, very seriously in terms of
Absolutely.
Considering, in terms of zoning, in having a workshop with them, I would feel like their feedback on what those different aspects that maybe what you have laid out here might affect the community in different ways, or what their opinion of those impacts might be, would be important for us to hear.
It looks like Mr. Snaki would like to speak again.
I had you back with us. Any comments, Ed? You're muted.
Please. Looks like he's unmuted now.
Okay, I'm unmuted on my end, so
Good.
thank you.
We got you.
I guess there's one big mistake on my part. I did not realize that as a Zoom participant, we were not allowed to register a vote. So I guess that's something that I didn't organize my activities today to be able to be in the council room. So apologize for that. The other thing is that I think I agree with Ms. Redmond that there's a lot of proposals there, and I think she brings up a good point. And as being my dual role as zoning board and planning, almost everything associated with multiple family attached residences that's come before the zoning board has had strong opposition, maybe not always directly guided, but strong opposition from the adjacent residents. So I guess those two larger school properties that we're now talking about are smack dab in the middle of one of the characteristically all residential areas, single family. So if you put out a bunch of alternatives that are possible, do we really want to have all of that? Do the neighboring property owners want to have that? Does city council know that that's what we're doing? Because as elected officials, I would feel if I were in their place, that if we didn't propose the thing that was consistent with that area in the center of Clawson, that there would be a lot of people in opposition to those particular members still remaining councilman or council people or mayor. So as the planning commission, I do realize that we've done a lot of this stuff in partial, but I'm still a little hesitant. I would vote against proposing it to city council right now or to a public hearing until we make certain that we as a planning commission have all our rationale down as to exactly why we're doing this and it makes sense based on our experience. So thank you.
Well, you can't vote. Thanks for your opinion. Just kidding, Ed. I have, personally, I have no problem with it because, like you're saying, this is not carved in stone. This is a wish list for the city of Clawson. And it's what we'd like to see happen. We're not changing ordinances at this point in time.
Right.
That will come later on. So right now, all we're doing is we're saying, this is what I would like Clawson to look like in 5 years from now. It's not enforceable as to what's going to go where at this point, still until we start changing zoning areas. So I personally, I'm comfortable with it the way it is. I believe, what's the order? We would get it out for a public comment before we send it on to mayor and council, correct?
It would go to, as a working draft to council, and then ask to release it to the neighboring communities and the other reviewing agencies. And then there's a 42-day, but we could have it's either 42 or 63-day review process, but it would end up being longer because we wouldn't probably have a public hearing until December.
It goes to mayor and council before public hearing?
Before it's released. It's the council's opportunity to say,
Look at it, yeah.
oh, this is reasonable. Like, we're not approving it, we're not agreeing to it yet, but it seems like it's largely a worthwhile document to send out. We're considering this, is basically what they're saying. Here's what we're thinking about doing. Then it comes back, you have the public hearing, and then you make a motion to adopt it when you're ready, and then council will as well. I would note too, and if this isn't as clear in the document as it could be, then we're happy to make that note. But remember that when we talked about this last time, the difference between all of those three options was like less than 10 units in each one. It was like 7 or 8. So this idea that we're dramatically altering the heart of Clawson by allowing all these multiple families is not really exactly what we have in the plan. So I don't want that to be misinterpreted that we're changing everything. from what we've seen and what we've seen in adjacent communities, that's probably what is going to be proposed. So at least with this document, we're saying, no, we want it to mostly be single family, and this is what we want it to look like, and this is how we want it to frame the street, and this is how we want that access to be, and this is how we want to make sure that the appearance fits in. This is what we want to do. We have, based on your comment, Aaron, about the street trees and or traffic, we noted traffic calming is important, and we made a provision for that on the areas where the streets are a little bit wider, that we envision having some bump outs and some street trees to cause that to be a calmed area as far as traffic goes. So trying to balance what we've been hearing in terms of really the single family being the predominant building type, but also trying to reflect some of the comments that we heard about something a little bit different to accommodate some of the different housing needs of the residents of the city. So however, if that's not, and we haven't heard from everybody, and I'm not going to look at anybody in particular, but I'm just saying that all of your feedback is important.
May I ask a question? We will talk about rezoning of those two properties, the two schools. We will talk in the future, right?
In the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is just a grandiose wish list, right? No.
Right.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
And then Jill, as interim steps, or as suggested as our consultant, and as interim steps between where we are right this moment, suggestions for interim steps of additional input, could we ask you and Joe for those, and whether we undertake those, and not.
Sure, absolutely.
Not in an interest in elongating this. I think it's worthwhile to move things ahead in a good and efficient fashion. But if there could be some, in your capacity and your expertise, some suggested interim additional input steps that we might take, additional open houses, additional Ed's experience with ZBA, Mr. Snock, and incorporating Ms. Redmond's comments as well.
Absolutely. I think one of the easiest things we could do is put it up online. We can have some assistance getting that out via social media, and we can ask some specific questions in there based on what's in the document. Have people read through it and then make comments. And that, I think, would be pretty straightforward. We could do that in a survey, online survey format, and have that back. We could do that before our next meeting. Well, maybe not our next meeting, but our next meeting. You guys meet too frequently. The next one in October. So whatever, the 24th? No, 26th.
Yeah,
The second meeting in October.
Building in more of those opportunities for additional input.
Sure.
It's just
And
never-
we
it's
can
just never a
also
bad thing.
have a direct invitation to the Zoning Board of Appeals and council members to that website and say, please, we've are asking for your specific input on the document. As you read through it, think about these things, and we can have, maybe some context for those questions, so that it's a little bit more direct for people to give us the feedback that it sounds like we're looking for. Does that sound reasonable?
Yes, I think if we forward it on to mayor and council, I'm assuming they get a hard copy like this to.
They would, but it sounds like the rest of the planning commission is not ready to move it forward yet, that they'd like that input. I would rather see the input before we send it out, because I don't want to have to send it out again if it's dramatically different.
So, Jill, in terms of feedback, I know. So, I'll start with saying I agree with some of the previous comments that this is a wish list, right? We're establishing a vision for the city, a potential vision. But I also would agree that the concepts, the alternative concepts proposed, may not change the heart and soul or the dynamic of the community itself. But in terms of feedback, I'm curious, because there's an apartment complex surrounded by these single-family homes just a couple blocks away from Shawm. And I'm curious if that radius in terms of public input and mailers that we sent out included residents within that neighborhood.
I don't know if it did. I don't think so.
Okay. I think we'd be interested to
It is.
understand some of the in terms of, because
Yeah.
we're talking about now, I don't want to say multifamily,
Mm-hmm.
but something closer to that. And apartment building is a very.
It's very different.
It's a very.
That's not
it's very
what's in this
diff-
document,
It's very
just doing it
different, but
very
it's also
clear.
an extreme, I think, on the other end of single family homes.
Right.
So I'm curious if we've had challenges with the residents of those single family homes being surrounding that apartment complex.
That I can't answer, and it's an interesting question. And I think that one of the things that's very clear in this that we're trying to impress, and I said it a couple of times, but I want to say it again, is that this is predominantly still single family. This is not all attached townhomes. This is not an apartment building, an apartment complex. This is predominantly single family with some additional housing types to make a more diverse type of neighborhood redevelopment possible. It's anticipating that there will be a bigger ask from the development community based on what we've seen in other communities. This is saying, we acknowledge that, but we don't want to see that. And if we need to be more clear in the document about that, then we absolutely want to do that to make sure that that's understood.
Well, I think so. I think that, I've shown homes that back up to neighboring apartment townhouses. You can clearly, you just don't feel private. It's different. And in terms of what I feel like, most residents would feel, they'd rather have more families in more, homes that are accommodating 2,000 square feet or, rather than the 1,000 square feet, because in terms of what the resale value might be, it's going to be affected one way or another by what goes there. And I feel like most will be swayed more towards larger single-family homes.
But we're not rezoning right now. You're talking about.
But if this is my wish list, as someone that is a resident and close to this property, it's not my wish list. That's not my wish list.
We're
So,
not doing the master plan. The master plan is already done.
no, you
Just
guys
a
keep
map.
talking about a wish list. This is like, hey guys, this is what we hope to look and find at this property, and we're putting it forth to council. But it doesn't clearly establish
Right.
what portion we're looking to. You give an inch, developers might take, and
Well, they'll come in and ask anyway,
Yes,
as you know.
of course. So we're
Yeah.
not confined to anything. If we put single-family homes, they're going to come in and say, "Hey, can we put this multifamily here?" I mean, it really will face that no matter what. And we're unlike other things that we've been working on. We're not at the will of them putting forth things without our zoning in place. So we can really have a say at any point in what goes there. And as far as I know, it's not looking to happen until 2024. So I'm not sure why we need to put this forth right now and have it done by December, when we still have.
That was just an estimate of the timeline that you could envision if we had a public hearing in December. And as you know, when we ever redo zoning amendments, if the zoning amendments followed, we know how long that takes. So that's another lengthy process that would also include a lot of input. So I don't think you would expect to see anything ready to go from the city standpoint until probably the end of 2022. So that puts us in a pretty good spot to be prepared for whatever we think might be coming in the future. I think it's important too, though, to think about, and we did get some positive comments at the open house about accessory dwellings and some of those other kinds of housing types. We heard no apartment buildings. We definitely heard that. We heard no multiple four-story buildings. We definitely got that. And then there was sort of this squishy area of some flexible type, one end of the spectrum to the other. And so that's why you see those development concepts are trying to say, well, maybe we could do some of those 2,000, 2,200 square foot homes, and maybe we can also fit in a couple of townhomes. And we did that in these properties. So it's kind of trying to be that, not just for the residents we have today, but in trying to anticipate the needs, the housing needs of people that we have in the future, while still trying to be respectful to the neighborhoods that are surrounding it. So again, if that's not clear, then we can make it more so in the document. So it sounds to me like, except for the chair, that that maybe, and maybe maybe you as well, that we would like to maybe see this one more time with some of that text, maybe more fully developed in terms of what those pictures mean and what they don't mean. And then after that, we can have it go out again for, on the website for additional comment and feedback. And so maybe I'd like to get all that. The thing I don't want us to see do is to drag this on for months on end, because we've got other things that we want to accomplish. We know that, is it signs that's next? We're super excited and fired up to do the sign ordinance with you, so we can't wait for that. But it's something that we have to do. And there's a few other things that we have on our list, and we want to keep you moving and productive. Sometimes when we spend too much time on a topic and we feel like we're spinning our wheels, people get frustrated. So we don't want to move things along too quickly before we're ready, but we also don't want to drag it out too long and lose that interest in the topic. So I think, pushing this a month and getting some more feedback and putting some more text and support in that document, I think we'll be in a good place. Does that sound good?
Can we let it go at that, or are you going to need a motion on this?
I don't need a motion.
I don't think.
No, but I would like consensus from all of you. And that's just consensus. Oh, looks like Scott's got his hand up too. They're not voting, but they would be providing their consensus.
Mr. Watson?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to say that I did concur with Greg on this, and putting it in front of City Council right now, again, this is only suggestions that we're putting forth right now. We're not locking anyone into anything, but I would agree with Jill in the fact that this process can move very, very slowly. And starting this process moving forward, I think would be a great idea. To touch on one of Ed's points that Ed was talking about, people being unhappy with this kind of development, just because of the amount of time that I've been on the planning commission, people that are unhappy with things will voice their opinion about it. People that are fine with something or are just comfortable with what would happen don't tend to voice their opinion. But when we hear from people that aren't happy, it's because they do tend to be the loudest voices. That's all. Thank you.
So what's your opinion? Now, we're not going to vote on this anyway, but what's your opinion on, would you like to send this on to council?
I would like to set it on to city council, to the mayor, yes.
You would? Okay, so there's at least two of us that would.
Yeah, why wouldn't we vote on it? Let's try.
Well, we're just taking a verbal. We're not, it's not a,
Doesn't have to be unanimous.
well, they can't vote because.
Right.
You can make an amendment, or, I mean, you can,
I know.
yeah, go a motion,
You
not
want
an
to make,
amendment.
you want to make a motion either
Yes,
for
I
or
do.
against it?
I want to make a motion to move this to council so they can direct staff to take it to Oakland County appointment and so on and so forth.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have support for that motion?
Support.
We have support. Can I have roll call if Nick's still with us?
Mr. Crucero,
Yes.
Mr. Burnick,
No.
Ms. Redmond,
No,
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
and Mr. Nushai.
Yes.
Motion carries.
What was the outcome? 3-2?
Yes. Motion passed.
So it's passed, so we moved on.
Yes. We still will add some of that descriptive text to make that more clear, the comments that we've made about the redevelopment concepts. And we will still make that available online and make a place on the website for people to send us their feedback.
And if mayor and council are not pleased with it, they'll be bouncing it back to you
They will.
before we go on to public. So
This is
it's going to
true.
have eyes on it for
Yes.
quite some time now.
can you make that link shareable to us as well? So
Absolutely.
we can spread it? And is there any way to make print available here at the city building at all for any of that? For residents who might not have internet access?
Yes.
Yes?
Yeah, oh,
Okay.
we'll have a couple copies up on the table.
Cool, okay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to agenda item number 8, the planner's report.
Okay, so, I forgot about this. So, oh, I already did. They're already on the table, yeah, I got here a little early. So at our last, this is just a quick one. As you remember, at our last meeting, we talked about the primary caregivers ordinance. That'll be on your agenda for public hearing at your next meeting in October. But there was a question about the process and how do we make sure that people adhere to all of the standards that we put forth in the ordinance. And so we've got a collection for you here of the current applications that we have already because we didn't want to recreate the wheel and we didn't want to create a whole new process for something that would be different in any way. So we've got the general, so what you'll see in this package is, well, there's two things at your desk. One is the MMMA license that goes through the MRA at the state level, just so that you'd see what's on their applications. That's just FYI. In here, we've got the general application for site plan review, and we've got the site plan checklist. As you remember, everything would have to go through site plan review. And so that's several pages of things that are required to be submitted. If we keep going, then on these pages, this is the certificate of occupancy application that has to be filled out, and that also requires inspections at that point. In addition to that, there is a form that's filled out for chemicals, if there are any chemicals being held on site, and so that's required by the fire department. And also the initial business license registration, that's required of every new business that comes in to the city. And so that has a lot more information on it as well. And the only thing that I did create is a plan of operation, because we don't really have anything that directly says what people should put in their plan of operation. So this is just something for administration to consider in terms of both their LLC licenses for a liquor license and for the primary caregivers. This is based on some of the existing plans of operation that we've seen, and then just some other things that we think are worthwhile for people to think about and then people to consider. So that's not really for discussion, but I just wanted you to know that this information is available and we currently have it. So hopefully that addresses the concerns that maybe were held at our last meeting when we were talking about the primary caregiver. So
Thank you.
thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to add? No.
Do you assume that we'll have people actually fill this form out and come in front of us and looking for a license for a? And if they can get the license of the state of Michigan, I don't know why they would waste their time with the city of Clausen's approval or disapproval.
Well, they'd have to, if they were going to occupy a space under our new ordinance that you're going to be looking at next month.
Okay, so we can
That's the
control
one
that.
Primary caregiver, where it has the locations where they'd be allowed. It requires site plan review, so they're going to come to you for that. Sorry, I know.
They'll get you.
That's all.
We're getting that fixed
Yeah.
too. Okay, we move on to staff report and training opportunities.
Talk about the MAP conference. Yeah, is John here? All right, why don't you do the training thing?
I don't recall the dates. The Michigan Association of Planning Conference is coming up
end of October.
at the end of October, and it's virtual, but there are like local gatherings, so it's kind of like a hybrid thing this year. We'll get you some information about it in your next packet.
But there is, I should add, the one of the hybrid meetup is tomorrow at the Detroit Shipping Company, and it is, I believe it's free to go if you're a member of MAP. If you are interested, let me know, and I can send you the link to that. It's tomorrow from, I think, 5 to 9 or so. And it's just an informal opportunity for people to get together. There are additional ones, and I can send the link out to the Planning Commission. There was an interesting one that's in October in Ann Arbor that involves trees, so I think that our former Planning Commission chairman would be interested in that one, so I have to make sure that I remember to send him a link to that as well. And those are the only training things that I can think of right off the top of my head. So I think Joan might have more.
Midtown tomorrow, Jill? Yeah, that's planning, the Detroit Shipping Company.
Yeah, Detroit Shipping Company.
Hello? The only thing I had was that Lucky Duck is in its, getting their, oh, I'm sorry, COO, their inspections done. And plan to open in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And ICE will probably open in another 4 to 6 weeks. So
Lucky Duck is the old with Moose Winooski's, if you weren't familiar. Just
Thank you, Joe. We move on to a legal update. Seeing no attorney here, I don't think we're gonna have one, right? Cancel that. And were we gonna discuss anything about, like last week's meeting, about capital improvement program, how we're gonna orchestrate that or get that rolling?
Just as a little follow-up to our meeting last night.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, oh, that's right. We wanted to have 2 to 3 planning commissioners. And those of you who are attending remotely are included in this request to participate on the capital improvement plan task force or review team, if you will. Your responsibilities would be probably 3 to 4 meetings. And that would be with department heads primarily to review their project lists for the next 6 years, their capital improvement projects that they've identified, and then participate in the ranking process and the development of the capital improvement plan. That draft, when we're ready to bring it, will come to the Planning Commission. Typically, the process is the Planning Commission would discuss it, department heads will attend the meeting as they're available to answer any questions, and then the Planning Commission would set a public hearing for the following meeting, have that, adopt it, and send it on to City Council. Our timeline on this, we'd like to get started in October. With staffs, it's a new process, and we know how difficult it can be to pull those things together for staff, especially when they are trying to get things done. And then hopefully get to at least the first draft to the Planning Commission December, January, and then hold the public hearing January, February, so that we can then transmit it to council hopefully by the end of February. So that's our timeline. We'd like 2 to 3 people to participate, and you can just let us know if you're interested.
Looking for volunteers, or is it an
Volunteers.
application that has to be filled out?
Just volunteers.
Just volunteers.
Yes, you're all immensely qualified.
Immensely.
Nobody's jumping right away, but,
It's an interesting process. It really is.
yeah. If anybody else has any comments, otherwise I'll wait for an adjournment motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to adjourn.
Support?
I have a motion, I have support, roll call, please.
Mr. Fitzer,
Yes.
Ms. Redmond,
Yes.
Mr. Pernick,
Yes.
Mr. Nushai, and Mr. Kucera.
Yes. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.